Part 5. The SpectraVideo SV-328 Mk2. The SpectraVideo SV-328 Mk2, released in 1984, was a reduced production costs version of the 8-bit home computer. While it kept the iconic casing of its 1983 predecessor, the Mk2 featured a redesigned motherboard as well as an integrated RF modulator. Though not officially MSX compliant, its hardware influenced the global MSX standard back in its time. As we already know, the SV-328 was an 8-bit home computer introduced by SpectraVideo in June 1983, along with the earlier released SV-318 that was also known as the Mk1. The Mk1 systems were then rather quickly replaced with the Mk2 as a cost-reduced version. The SV-328 was SpectraVideo's business-targeted model of the SpectraVideo range, with the system sporting a compact full-travel keyboard with included full numeric keypad. The SV-328 came with hardware that boasted 80 kilobytes of user RAM. This comprised of 64 kilobytes available for software and 16 kilobytes of dedicated video memory. This was a very respectable amount for a system of its time. Other than the keyboard and RAM, this machine was identical to its little brother, the SV-318. To this day, most still say the 328 is considered the predecessor of the original MSX computers to come later on. As we have seen, the SV-328 was a design on which the MSX standard was being based on by SpectraVideo's next system. The fully MSX-compliant successor to the 328 was the MSX1 SV-728. The SV-728 looks almost identical to the SV-328 on the outside, the only immediately noticeable differences being a larger cartridge slot in the central position and not to the right side of the top case. This redesign was done to fit MSX standard cartridges that are wider and bigger than the SV-318 and SV-328 cartridges. That, along with a lighter shaded keyboard and the MSX badging being the way how to tell them apart. Reference to the operating system. The Microsoft Extended BASIC is not to be confused with MSX BASIC, although some marketing at the time claimed that Microsoft Extended is what MSX stood for. In its time, more than 130 titles with games and other software were officially released for the systems. Along with this, a lot more homebrew titles even being released today. SV-328 system specs. Processor: Z80A running at 3.6 MHz. ROM: 32 kilobytes. BIOS: 16 kilobytes. BASIC: 16 kilobytes. RAM: 64 kilobytes. VDP: TMS 9918. Video RAM: 16 kilobytes. Text mode: 40 by 24. Graphic mode: 256 by 192. Or high resolution, with 32 by 24, with 15 colors. Sprites: 32 by 1 color. Maximum 4 per horizontal line. Sound chip: General Instrument AY-3-8910 PSG. I/O chip: Intel 8255. Now for some of the SV-328 peripherals. The standard ports of the SV-318 and SV-328 support only a few, such as the SV-903 and SV-904 tape drive, a CVBS monitor, or external RF modulator for TV, and 2 joysticks. However, with the addition of one of the super expanders, the 601 or 605, you were offered more options, and this turned it into a real business computer of its time. Add-on hardware: SV-803 memory expansion card, 16 kilobytes. SV-807 memory expansion card, 64 kilobytes. SV-805RS, 232 card. SV-701 internal modem, 300 baud. SV-802 Centronics parallel port card for printer. SV-806 80-column video card. SV-801 floppy controller card, needed for disk drive usage. Hard disk controller card: there was very little known about this until 2026, when one was found out in the wild. SV-809 network card. SV-602 mini expander for 1 card. SV-601A expander case with power supply and many slots. External disk drives. SV-605B super expander, similar but with built-in floppy drive and an optional second drive. SV-603 ColecoVision adapter, enabling ColecoVision games to be played on the SV-328. SV-901C 80 columns printer at 50 CPS. This was a refurbished Psychosia SK100, SV-902 external floppy drive for the SV-601 expander, SV-903 stereo cassette drive with mic, SV-904 mono cassette drive no mic, SV-105 graphics tablet, SV-2000 and 200B robot arm system for MSX and other systems. This is to just name a few.
So there we have it. That is the Spectra Video 328 Mark II. Now there is a few differences between the Mark I and the Mark II, and we'll take you inside there and show you that shortly. The biggest difference is that the cost reduction in the very early part of it there, it made them harder to repair because they went to PLAs and stuff like that, and there was no information kept about that. So unless there was a way of going back through it and finding out what was set to what internally in it, there are no spare parts for the PLAs and that in these. And that also carried on to the MSXs they built as well, which was the 728 and the 738. They have a bad habit of the PLAs dying, and when they do, there's not much you can do with them, unless you can find a machine with a dead keyboard or another issue with a good PLA in it. So anyway, we will head over to the desk camera top down and we'll open up a 328 Mark II and have a look inside. Okay, so here we have it. This is our 328 Mark II. This is the one that's in the beginning video as well. It is one of my own ones, and as you can tell, the first thing you can tell between the Mark I and the Mark II, other than this badge, the Mark IIs have this label on them as well. That was the same for the 318 Mark IIs, but theirs was like a yellow and a aqua sort of colour, a greeny blue, so that type of a colour, and yellow. But a lot of those nowadays have actually faded and are really hard to get good ones like this. A lot of the ones I see like this, the red is all gone and the black is just about to go. I do have some of these that I'm looking at getting remade, and I have the design for both of them made up for the 318 and 328. So it may be something I'll look at. I still have a whole pile of keyboard key overlays to go on the individual keys, and this was from back in the day when, quite a few years back now, I made an Amiga MSX computer, and we could only get just straight keys, nothing on them, and I got commercially made see-through letters and keys that you can actually stick on top of them. So I still have plenty of those, and at the same time I also got them made for the Amiga 500, but the Amiga I had them made in white and in black, because some people were going to the black keyboards you used to be able to get, and it was very hard to see the grey writing on them. So I got them done in a white so then people could actually see them, and I got the black ones done for the lighter colour keys. But I still have lots and lots of those available in the back room. But the other ones I got made were for MSX, which are almost identical to this. So if you're needing a key letter or something to go on top, I do have those, and you can just get a generic key and then place it on. Anyway, enough about that. Let's open this up and let's have a look inside it. As it was saying, they changed away from the RF style phono plug and with the 5 or 6 pins in it, and went internal with the RF, and then they put the video and the audio in here as well, and that made life a lot easier, because you didn't have to worry about where you put your RF adapter and then trying to get it to run on something better than a TV. So that's what they did. They kept the cassette port and of course the expansion port, and that's where your expander would plug into. They do, when the expander's plugged in, they did leave enough room here for you to have a cassette port plugged in onto the side as well, so you could have that kit plugged in. And as I was saying, or had said for me in that video, this is the cartridge port for the Spectra Video 318 328s, and this is a 30 pin socket that is in there, edge connector for the cartridges. And when they went to the MSX, they had to move it into the middle here because the MSX ones were a lot bigger. I think they were a 38 or something like that, or is it more? I'd have to have a look. I can't tell you off the top of my head, but that's why they moved it into the middle, and because there was extra going on internally with the MSX as well, so that's why a lot of that got moved over. And because on the side was just your standard power, and this they kept into the first of their MSXs, which was the 728, your power switch and your two joystick ports, and they were the standard Spectra Video style joystick ports, and they were made for the quick shots and that type of thing. So anyway, I've unscrewed all this for you so we don't have to muck around with that, and we'll just gently lift this up, because this one I haven't modified and it still has the cable on it. These cables, if you're not doing anything with them, sorry, there's a bit of gunk on it, if you're not opening and closing the case, they're fine, you can leave them as they are. As they go a bit faulty over time, you've got to get in here and work on the boards, and the biggest problem is you're opening this up, you're bending it, and it's attached to the keyboard. So this is physically attached to this keyboard, and they hot glued it on at both ends after soldering it. The problem is it's going to bend and it's going to break. I did have a way of, or I still do, have a way of putting in a ribbon cable, and I take this out, I put a header pin on this end, and on here I run ribbon cables with sockets on them, so that what you do is it folds the opposite way around and it plugs into the front this way of the where the header connector goes down here, and that just means if you need to work on this you can unplug it and take it away. The other thing I did later on is I made a connector to go onto here. It's hit and miss. Sometimes it's good and other times it can be a bit of a pain. The problem with this is that if you're going to work on the board, you've got to pull the RF modulator out. So that's an issue. But I am looking at building a project to replace this. Same connectors will come over from here, but it's going to give you different outputs and stuff. I'm looking at incorporating like a TZX Dreno type thing in it as well. Making it for S-Video, AV and maybe HDMI. I want to make it so you don't have to cut up the back of the case. I want to look at the TZX Dreno type of thing, because we don't have to worry about the cassette port then, and we can use up all the space at the back here for the inputs and outputs and information coming into here. That's something down the track. I'm just sort of starting to work on that. I've got other projects I'm doing right at this moment that are taking up my time. But inside here, this was the ULA they did, or the PLA they did. The earlier versions are easier to work on, and that's because it was more of the TTL logic in here, and if anything broke you could replace it. Whereas with these, once that goes, you pretty much had it. The sound chip and the video chip over here, there are modern replacements for those. You can actually get Pico versions of them, and there's a few different types of Picos of the video chips out there. The CPU standard Z80, and there are also other options for those out there as well. And then you have the peripheral I/O ports here, and that's what I said, that the cartridge slot is very, very small. Now I'll just grab you one to show you comparison with an MSX. And so this is one for an MSX. And therefore you can see it is almost twice the size. It's about a half bigger again. So it's probably a 40 pin or a 38 or something. That's telling me, you know, they can't put it over here because it's taking up more real estate. So when they redesigned the boards for the MSXs, they put this in the middle to start with. They didn't have a separate board because all this was combined into one later on. So they didn't have to worry about flying leads and things like that and mechanical connections and so forth. The only thing you got to watch with these is some of the very early versions of these, you need to check the fuses. A lot of people in the early days, for some reason, were coming with a lower amperage fuse. And these are meant to be a 3 amp for when you plug the expander in. They need a higher amperage here for the extra peripherals and stuff. A lot of them came with like 1.5s or 1.8s, and they are a fast blow, and the problem being is that when you put that in, after a while the fuses would go and the whole machine would go dead on you. And a lot of people couldn't work out what that was. But that's what it is. It was the fuses that went. You could usually open it up and find out the fuse is blown, but then you'd be wondering, why did my fuse blow? What's gone wrong? There was nothing wrong with it. It was just it was underrated for the machine. But when you look at these, they're a very basic board. I would have liked them to have kept more logic in here, or released the information for that. Well, at least Bondwell could have, instead of ditching it all. That would have been really, really nice, and that means we could have made a modern replacement out of CPLDs or something for that, or FPGAs out of it. So that is the very, very downfall of it. Both of these are your positive regulators, your 5 and your 12 volts. That is your minus regulator, because these were the very early version where the video RAM was the earlier RAM and it had to have the dual voltages. The other thing was is the video chip needs 12 volts as well. But you can go through and pull out your video RAM and replace it with 4164s. All you got to do is do the leg alteration on them, so it turns them into 16s, which is like that, and it's basically lifting up pin 1, lifting up pin 8, and then you jumper a wire from 8 to 9, and you can cut that off or leave it up, and then you just replace it with that. That means you only need to use 5 volts for your video RAM, and you don't have to run the other 2 voltages. It just makes the machine run cooler. The main RAM you don't need to worry about because they are 4164s. This was only done that way because that's how the video processor worked with it. When you went up from this to the 992829s, I think they were, or was it the, no, it was the 9938 and 58s. They went into the 4-bit RAM. So they were 4-bit by 64s rather than 1-bit by 64s. When you went into those, they used the newer style RAM and they only ran on 5 volts, so you didn't have to worry about it. The other thing was is those video processors could handle more RAM, so they could handle up to 128K, I think they were. So, and that's in video RAM. And of course those chips, once you went up into the 9938 and 58s, etc., they had a lot more video modes, a lot more sprites, and a lot more colours, and collision detection and stuff like that. They had a lot more going on that you could do with them than you could with these earlier chips. But these earlier chips were, for what they were back in the day, they were a very advanced chip. I mean, they had video in on the chips, and if you set it up with the extra pins and you wanted to hack it around, you could do video titling and all sorts of things on these. They were a very capable chip, but they are starting to show their age. And that is why a lot of other systems use the same video chip. The Coleco, the Texas Instruments, the 994, I think it was 99/4s, I think did, and a few of the others. They all ran. I think it was the Sega SG-1000 ran the same video processors. So a lot of these machines are very, very close with hardware they ran internally. The Coleco ran a slightly different sound chip, but when you put the Super Game module on and got the extra RAM in it, it also had one of these audio chips in it too, to give you the PSG sound, and that give you better sound. They had the slightly earlier version of a cheaper audio chip in it. So there's lots of similarities, similar joystick ports, etc. Same processor, Z80. That's a look inside them. They're nothing super flash or anything like that. This is a very, very tidy unit. That's why it's in my collection. It's a little yellowed, but I do not mind them a little yellowed, because they're a nice machine. I don't use this a lot as I used to. When I want to use this, I'll pull it out and I will plug my Coleco adapter on it. I have a 603, which is the Coleco unit that plugs into the back here, and I have a pile of Coleco cartridges. I'll tell you one nice thing. I picked up a Coleco Atom a couple of years ago from the States. This was before the stupidness went down with their president at the moment. And I got a pile of cartridges with it, and I thought, these are NTSC. Plugged them in the Coleco unit, and they all work on this. I can actually put them onto the Commodore monitor, and they actually play on it. So I just found that out as a bit of a fluke, and I thought, well, that's awesome, because I only have about probably 12 different Coleco games, and there are a lot of the CBS soft box, where they're plastic, but they're like a soft case. They're quite easy to break, but I have a lot of the games. I have Donkey Kong, Looping, Penguin, Smurfs, Donkey Kong Jr., Avenger, all that sort of stuff. I have a lot of those sort of games in original boxes. The other stuff I got is not in original boxes. I also got a pile of Atari 2600 cartridges with it as well when I got the Atom, but I need one of the expansion unit ones to plug into it to be able to use those on the Coleco, because they were very, very close as well to the Colecos and that. So, and when you plug those in, I think the only thing the Atari 2600 used on them was the video and the power. That was about it, I think, and everything else was run off the front expansion unit that plugs into them. So guys, there we are. So that's your Spectra Video 328 Mark II. As I said, not a lot different to the 328 Mark I. It was just the internals were a wee bit different, and they went away from all the TTL logic. I mean, back then I could see the sense in it and cost cutting and that. It was just that I would have liked the information for the PLAs and that they made were kept and made available after Bondwell got rid of the company. That would have been really, really nice to do that. Other than that, I suppose somebody could spend time and backwards work on one of these. They have done it with some of the other systems. I think some of the Commodores and some of the Spectrums and so forth, they have backward compatibility, done those to work out what they're doing and so on, and then working with CPLDs and FPGAs, they've remade the chips to actually go in and replace these. And some of these chips are getting so small now, you can do it in a package size that you just pull a chip out and replace that chip with a more modern one, which is really, really cool. And it keeps these old girls running. So guys, that's it for now. I think you're probably a bit sick of the prattling and the rest of it. Hope you're enjoying the series. The next one up after this I'm going to do is the 728, and then I will see if I can find, I have got a few 738s, but they're not running. Well, I think one is running, the others aren't. They have that problem I was telling you about with the PLAs are gone on them, and that tends to be the very, very common thing with them. So anyway, that's where we're up to, guys, and hopefully you're enjoying this series. So until our next video, part 6, you guys have a great day, eh? And be safe out there. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.